Ian. Currently it's Ian that impacts the Florida and the East Coast. It's really impacting reinsurance markets and everything else. So tell us how great our renewals are going to go next year.
Just what you wanted to hear today. Work comp and ALAE, but you're not going to hear that. You're going to hear about what we think 2023 is going to look like. So what I would say is sit down, put your seatbelt on, and grab a wheel. It's going to be a tough year. As we go into fourth quarter, this isn't exactly what we thought we would be saying right now. We are rewriting market conditions as we stand here today. So once Ian hit, the whole market just changed. So I'm going to talk about property and casualty today, and then I'm going to hand it off to Nate, who's our cyber expert. He's going to talk to you a little bit more about cyber. Now, a lot of this stuff I'm going to talk about, you guys may have heard, but I'm going to just harp on you a little bit because the market's changing, and the more you do for yourself, the better you're going to do for your organization, and the better a broker can represent you. So just some of the common underwriting concerns in the market right now, regardless of the line of coverage right now, is the integrity of your data. We've got a long way to go with the integrity of many of your data that you have out there. Things are changing, they want to see it differently, and what we're hearing is that's the way we've always done it. That's not the way we're going to continue to do it. The underwriting community has changed. And I'm going to be speaking, I know we've got risk pools in here, we've got members of pools, we've got cities, we've got counties, state, airport. So this is in general, if you're a member of a risk pool, you're going to feel the pain that the risk pools are going for as they are purchasing their reinsurance for their membership. So integrity of data is very important. The underwriters are very skittish right now. They're paying out huge social inflated claims, huge catastrophic claims. If they don't trust your data, they are going to adjust your rates for you at the desk based off of what they're thinking. Loss history is very important. Your loss runs, I can't say enough about this. Your loss runs need to include ALAE. We need to have the losses ground up, not capped. You can remember back in the day, as risk managers, you had self-insured retention. Really all you cared about was what was in your retention. We have to see the entire loss. We don't want to see capped losses. They need to be coded correctly, and they need to be in Excel so they can go through all the analytics for the actuaries that are being performed as you're in the underwriting process. Other things that are important right now are, and you guys were talking about a lot of this, policies, procedures, and training. That is very, very important. So it's more than a three-legged stool anymore. We've got brokers, we've got risk managers, risk control is important, claims handling is very important, and your actuary is very important. So it's not just a couple of people anymore. There's a lot of us that takes the team. So I'm going to start with property. If anybody has questions, let me know. This could be a fireside chat. How's that? So concerns on the property right now is your statement of values and your insurance to value. When's the last time you had an appraisal? Are you keeping up with inflation? Because we've got claims being paid out for examples of buildings that have been demolished. They're on the schedule for $75 million. That claim's coming in at $250 million. That's when underwriters lose their job. So your schedules have to be up to date, get your appraisals up to date, and make sure you're staying up with inflation. Because again, if you don't, it's being adjusted for you at the underwriting desk. The other thing is modeling is very, very important. You know, what is your wildfire exposure? What's your flood exposure? What's your convective storm exposure? We're not going to get good modeling if we don't have good statements of that. So that is very, very important. Underwriters are concerned in Colorado, speaking about Colorado, on the casualty side, you guys are on the national news. Nationally, everybody knows what's happening in Colorado. I'm talking about property right now. Underwriters are scared to death. The older risk managers might remember when flood, it was flood, everything was flood. City of Boulder County, CU. We had to walk the rivers, we had to do everything was flood. Now it's wildfire. They're very concerned about wildfire. There is modeling for wildfire. It's new, it's not perfect, it's going to improve. Hail, convective storm, and floods. So if you're meeting with underwriters, those are the things they're looking for, and they're going to model you. Again, that's why your statement of values is so important. Again, with regard to property, risk control, training, and looking at your probable maximum loss. So when we're looking at models and we're looking at analytics with regard to your loss history, that's how we're developing your program structure. What limit should you have? What should your SIR be? What should your deductible be? Because for so long we were in the soft market. We were taking the smallest retentions we could. All of a sudden the hard market came in. You're trading dollars with the carriers. Your burn layer has grown. We can look at every one of your loss runs for the last 10 years, and we can see where social inflation set in. And a lot of that has to do with some of the legislation that's going on in Colorado too, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Talked about analytics. So for 2023, I just read an article yesterday in Business Insurance that says we're going into a hard property market. Well, in Colorado, I would say we were in a hard property market starting 6 years ago with hail. We were in a hard market before the rest of the United States was experiencing a hard market, and then the casualty hit, and then the cyber hit. We were expecting to be out of a hard market. We felt like there was rate correction in the property arena. They've been asking you for lots of money. Lots of you have bad losses. We felt like the rate correction took place, and that they also have to answer to Moody's and AM Best. So they have to be able to show the aggregate exposure they have on their books. So we really thought everything was getting right-sized and we were doing really good until Ian hit. So now you're reading in Business Insurance, instead of going into a moderate market, we're going into another hard market on the property. So just be ready for it, get your schedules ready, do your modeling, communicate. I've seen risk managers lose their jobs, they're not communicating higher up. You guys don't do the wildfires, you don't do the police shootings. We want to show upper management what you look like. Here's what we look like. This is what underwriters are looking at. We never got into the analytics as much as we do now. And I really think it's fun, and I'm sick because I love insurance, but it's fun to tear it apart and see what you look like as an organization. And then you can come in and sell it and say, yeah, that's what it looks like, but because of that, we're doing this on risk control. We've changed the way we're reserving, things like that. So I want you to be able to help yourself. So other things that are happening because of Ian, reinsurers are increasing rates, which means the carriers have to pass that down, and they're increasing rates. The other thing that's happening is they're reducing capacity again. They were shocked, they got hit in some of those higher layers, and they're reducing capacity so they can try to control what the end of the year looks like for their loss history. So also premiums, so some of you have layered and quota share large property programs. If you're part of a risk pool, that's what the risk pools are dealing with. So when we have like 6 carriers on just one level of coverage, like 25 million, now we're running into higher minimum premiums. So a lot of that is what's pushing the property rate as you go forward. If you're a 1/1 renewal right now, I feel sorry for you, because we hit the skids. We have a lot of risk pools. We have everything out in the market right now. When Ian hit, underwriters quit working. Their management went in a swirl, and they're just wondering what's going on. They're trying to renew their reinsurance right now. They're trying to guess what their rates are going to be. So we're in a bit of turmoil right now because of Ian, specifically on the property side. Any questions on property?
Do you have any bad news, Karen? That all sounds good.
And I'm retiring in 6 weeks. It's all good things. So let's talk, yeah.
We just went through an appraisal. We did a full appraisal of all our buildings. And what was really interesting is when we got our initial draft back, our appraisers came back with buildings valued less than what we built them for 2 years ago.
That's strange.
It is very strange, yeah. So if you're getting an appraisal done, watch it very closely, because we have to go back with our construction contracts to the appraisers. And, I don't know, Jessica, you help clarify
Yeah,
some
there
of
was
that
specific
stuff.
documentation,
They want the AIA contracts, the
contracts,
drawings,
so
everything.
I'm going line by line because the concern is even labor now, is skyrocketing because they can't get employees and stuff. So the costs are all over the place. They really have to look at the whole picture and commissioners to explain why there's a difference in what we pay for it and what's actually worth now.
My concern is one being underinsured or overinsured, but then in our facilities group really getting ripped off basically by the contract and paid more than they should.
Do you have any of those buildings that were appraised less? Do you have any, put any of those up for collateral for bonds?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay, that's
But-
another consideration.
But that is something that is coming next year, and we're gonna need to do that, and that's why it's one of the reasons we did full appraisal. So that's,
You're an anomaly. Most people are seeing it in so many ways. That's a good reason to do an appraisal, right? It could come out higher, it could come out lower, and you've been paying higher premiums, you don't need to. But we just need to know, like I said, what we look like. If you're doing appraisals, secondary information, secondary cope information is important. Get it while you can. So if you can get geocoding done, do it. Make sure it's in the middle of the building, not in the parking lot, or you're not going to get a good flood reading. You might get a good wildfire reading, but not a good flood reading. But get that secondary cope information going if you're doing appraisals. Okay? All right, well, that's a good story. I don't think that would happen to everybody. All right, let's talk about casualty. I mean, property is pretty black and white. Casualty it's crazy. It's crazy these days. So we're still in a hard market. Colorado, we're in a market that carriers don't want to work in. So we've got schools here, we've got sexual abuse exposures, we've got Title IX, and then we've got law enforcement, we've got jails, employment practices. So let's talk a little bit about what is scaring these casualty underwriters to death and why some of them are pulling out of the state of Colorado. So we've got social inflation. We all experienced that while we were going through COVID. And we do have, what am I trying to say? The people with the problems, the human problems that are happening because of being through COVID. So we have, COVID downstream, what's going on with COVID. Last year, this time, underwriters were putting their reserves up for what they don't know what's going to happen with COVID right now. So from many, many different aspects. We've got civil unrest that's gone away a little bit, but will it come back? Recent Colorado legislative changes, and Jeff, you were talking about this. So with sexual abuse and molestation, that makes carriers nervous, obviously the schools. The Claire Davis Act, federal, the new Title IX rule, procedures that you're supposed to utilize. And then just recently, this started January 1 of 2022, we have a reviver statute. So the reviver statute on sexual abuse and molestation, they are opening up any claims from 1/1/1960 to 12/31/2021. You have 5 years to bring a sexual abuse claim. So they've opened up that statute, it's not gone. So our self-insured clients, our risk pools, our carriers closed those old program years. They thought they weren't going to have anything coming towards it. And our lovely legislators did that to us. The other thing they did is 1/1/2022 on sexual abuse claims, no more statute of limitations. So you're going to live with those claims going forward. So that's something you need to think about. Your premiums might go up. Your outlook's going to be a little bit different. Also, law enforcement taking away qualified immunity defense. That's huge. Underwriters don't like that. That's one reason why carriers are pulling out of the state of Colorado. Police Accountability Act. Not a really big deal for underwriters, but what that tells underwriters is that we're not supporting our law enforcement. We're not supporting our security, and that's concerning. So that's really concerning underwriters. What else did I want to say? Okay, and then, obviously law enforcement is a big exposure, whether you're a county or city, you've got that. Jails, we have some huge social services claims out there, and employment practice. So those are the things that are keeping underwriters up at night. And again, we're running into problems here. The loss runs are horrible. So the underwriters have to send it into analytics. They have to send it into actuaries. If you don't have proper reserves, if you've got claims, they are comparing your claims from last year to this year. They're digging through it. So we do it first. So you want to start early. When it comes to our desk, we don't just go like this and send it to the underwriters. We dig through it too. we try to underwrite it first and see the discrepancies. So when underwriters get it, remember, integrity of data is very, very important right now. So make sure you're coding your claims right, make sure your reserves are right, make sure we've got ground up, all the way through the no capping of the losses there. Very important. Let's see. Carriers pulling out of states. I thought this would be interesting for you since we're West Coast, right? Colorado obviously is one. California, anybody could guess that, right? Washington, Oregon. Washington doesn't have tort caps. Oregon does have tort caps, very similar to Colorado, and Arizona. So those states right now are all experiencing pretty much what Colorado's experiencing, especially on the law enforcement side. More conservative states are doing very, very well. They have the small self-insured retentions, 500,000, 750 instead of 2 million and 3 million, save for our risk pool. Conservative states around us, Idaho, Utah, James, they're doing very, very good, very conservative thinking there. And their losses just look different, so we look very different than they do. Program structure is important. It may be that we're not going to be able to buy subsidies up to 10 million or 40 million. I mean, universities buy it much higher than school districts. It may be that we're not going to get law enforcement liability as high. So what are we going to do? We need to start talking about those things. You're going to need to start, when we run the analytics, we're going to be able to show you your burn layer. You can handle the burn layer far more or less expensive than an insurance carrier that has profit loaded on there. Plus the fact that they're scared. So you're getting that part. They're scared about what's happening with law enforcement. So that's another reason to know what you look like. Look at your casualty loss runs. Where's your burn layer? You know, where did we see that social inflation coming in? Let's tell the underwriters a story. Now, what are you doing? Now you need to start funding more. So I think the thing we learned in a hard market is that in the soft market, let's not get too cozy with the carriers. Let's start building our surplus and staying a little bit further and really keeping that coverage as catastrophic for that rainy day fund. So it's going to be really easy just to jump right back into that soft market and say, hey, I can get it for cheaper than I can fund for it. Well, then you want to think back to days that we're living through right now. I don't think it's going to go back. I think the days of seeing rate reductions are gone. We may see flat. I just don't think we're going to be able to beat up the underwriters. Old mentality is, let's go in, let's beat up that underwriter. Why didn't that go down? Why isn't that flat? We are tiptoeing with underwriters right now, just to get it closed, just to get it closed, or they will walk away. And that's the last thing we need, is for you not to have insurance and have to walk into your boss or your upper management and say, we're uninsurable. And they're going to say, why? And you haven't shown them what you look like. So again, tear your account apart and show, your upper management what you look like. So I always say communicate early and communicate often. Again, with this line of coverage, so important. I had an underwriter tell me yesterday, after the accident on the train track took place, hit the national news. My God, Karen, in driver training, they tell us not to park on railroad tracks. I think the police in Colorado are not qualified to be police. So we're having to say, what are our policies and procedures? What's our training? We need to sell your account to underwriters. So just things like that are going to help us navigate this hard market. And I really believe it's going to make you guys a better insured, a better client going forward. That's the end of my spiel. Now I'm going to let Nate get up here. Does anybody have any questions? Awesome. Thank you.
Well, after that very uplifting speech from Karen, we're going to go into more doom and gloom on my side. So, obviously, we're going to be talking about cyber. As the residential millennial of Gallagher, I've been kind of voluntold to be the cyber expert of our team. So, I get all the fun stuff of anything tech-related. And unfortunately, I'm going to end this on a very down note. Cyber, with everything going on in the property and casualty space, expect even worse in cyber. It is still continuing to see, and I know I'm a broken record at this point, everyone's heard this before, we are continuing to see record losses in the cyber field. Ransomware continues to be the biggest driver across the board in terms of losses both in severity and in frequency. IBM does a report every year based on their claims data. They put out for 2021's claims data, the average ransomware cost $4.6 million. So with that, that's telling you that this is still, that's obviously an all-in cost. That's including the notification expenses that happen, the legal costs to defend any lawsuits that come in, any fines, penalties that get assessed against you guys. All of that goes into that 4.6. And even then, that is some of the low side of what we're seeing in the market, particularly for public entity, because you guys are seen as such a prime target for the cyber area. You guys, just by the nature of your operations, touch so many different organizations, have so many records on hand, particularly between law enforcement, taxation, and your public health departments. You guys have so much personal information on hand. And unfortunately, budgets typically in public entity for IT staff are not the same as the Fortune 100 companies. So you typically don't have the controls that like a Sony or a Target have type scenario. So they're coming after you with extreme prejudice as a main target with that. So underwriters are very scared of public entity across the board. So much so that pretty much all admitted markets have pulled out of cyberspace for public entities. There are a handful that will still write it if you have absolutely pristine controls, no losses, that will still write some things, but they are few and far between. Most of you guys, as you're looking in the open market space, kind of excluding pools for a second here. When you're in the open market space, we're going to non-admitted markets, Lloyd's are the ones who are making the most play. With that though, a lot of them don't want to focus in public entity book, so underwriters are hitting their writing capacity quota for public entity very early in the year, usually by March, April, May. They've already hit their maximum quota for underwriting capacity for public entity. So typically those.
So you're saying I'm gonna get the cyber next year? So
I-
it's May.
Spoiler alert, we'll come back to you. You're always an anomaly, Jeff. And so with that, underwriters are looking at controls, and they're looking at making sure you have everything. We'll talk about those kind of controls that they want to see at minimum in place. But if those are not in place, expect that you're going to have cut limits. You're going to have reduced capacity, higher retentions, huge rate increases, if you get a quote at all. We're seeing classic non-renewals across the board. If you have a loss, just expect a non-renewal. The unfortunate side, and the quote you're going to get after a loss, unfortunately. So the safest risk is always the one that just experienced the loss, because they're the ones who put in all the controls. But getting cyber coverage after a loss is always super hard in this marketplace. And so with that, a little bit of silver lining in the cyberspace that's changed over the past year or so is if you've gone through kind of a couple tough years of renewals where they cut limits down to their maximum capacity, which is about 5 million. You have 5 million in capacity right now. You have a decent retention. Carriers are maintaining limits to retention. So long as you have the controls in place and you're loss-free, carriers are staying on accounts so long as you have those controls. If you don't have those controls, expect that your ransomware will be removed, that they're going to be putting specific sublimits for users. If an MFA, the big one that's not in place, they will put an exclusion on your policy that says, we don't cover anything if it could have been prevented by MFA. All of these things are going into place. But if you already have the controls in place, hopefully you can get a quote. Now, even with that, expect significant premium rate increases this year. Even with all the controls in place on a pristine account, expect at minimum 30 to 40% rate increases. That's just across the board, everyone's seeing that. If you don't have controls, or you had a loss in your history, expect closer to 100% rate increases plus readjustment on limits. It's a tough world to live in with cyber. And so with that, we talked about what can we do to forecast the next kind of year to make sure we have those controls in place to put you in that best possible position. And there are kind of 7 key controls that underwriters are looking at. Every carrier has a couple different controls, but these are kind of the minimum 7 that they're going to be looking for. First and foremost, that everyone's heard about, multi-factor authentication, 2-factor, MFA, it's got to be in place. Now, where we've seen challenges with this is a lot of organizations have rolled out MFA in some capacity at this point, but it's not organization-wide. underwriters want to see this across the entire organization. So that's remote access to email is the big one. Even if you're on a mobile device, make sure you've got MFA in place. Anything business critical, anything with privileged users, even if it's remote or local access, it's blocked out behind MFA. Remote access, even behind VPNs, remote desktops, make sure you have that MFA in place. And one thing I do want to point out too is obviously everyone in this room, we're risk management experts, insurance experts, we are not IT experts. And so you guys are relying heavily on your IT team to answer these questions, and that sometimes can create an issue just because the underwriter is not looking necessarily at an IT perspective, but from an insurance IT perspective, which can create a disconnect. So make sure you're very clear, setting up time with your IT. Don't just send them an app and say, can you complete this for me? Make sure you understand what's on there. We have had situations where IT thought they understood a question, and so the risk manager signed off on the app, we submitted it, and then about a month after we found it, carrier kind of looked at it a little bit more, realized MFA is not in place in all the areas we want to see it, or other controls are not in place. You don't want to be in that situation. Underwriters with cyber in particular, they have no grace. If they find that there's something incorrect in your application after finding, they will pull their quotes, they will cancel your policies midterm. They don't have sympathy in those scenarios. So make sure you're understanding what the IT team and you guys are putting on that application so you don't have those issues. Also make sure your backups are up to date. Make sure that they are continuous daily backups. We see all the time, they're like, oh yeah, we back it up, but then they back it up once a month type scenario. If you're backing it up once a month, that's not going to help you because a month's worth of data is a lot of data to have to restore if you're in that scenario. So make sure you have all of that stuff, and make sure you're testing it. We ran into a situation, we had an insured that had a loss, and they're like, well, we got backups, let's restore from it. They didn't realize that the server that they were storing all their backups on was running an outdated version of their operating system, and so when they tried to restore it with the new operating system, their main server was running on, it corrupted half the data, and they weren't able to restore everything. So make sure that you are testing it. We recommend at minimum once a year doing some sort of implementation to see if you can re-upload things from backups. Our high recommendation is do it at least semi-annually, but at least once a year get it done. Also patching is a big thing. We see all the time, Apple released a big patch here not too long ago because of a severe issue on the phone with the iOS system. Make sure you're patching at least weekly for those critical issues. Because hackers know that Microsoft, the Apples of the world are going to release those patches quickly. So that's as soon as they have that vulnerability, they're going to get in as quickly as they can because they know they have a short time frame to get in your system. So make sure you're patching everything at least weekly for all of that stuff. Employee training is another big one that all the carriers, they just want a basic, making sure people are understanding what they're doing with data. 90% of claims are driven by someone not having common sense and just clicking on something they're not supposed to. Making sure at least onboarding and annually you're doing some sort of training. Also phishing training is a big one that people are looking for. And then incident response plan is another big one that they're really wanting to see. Pretty much everyone at this point has an incident response plan for some sort of disaster. Underwriters want to see that you have a cyber incident response plan. That if you have a breach scenario, who are the people that are notified? What are the steps to shut down the system? How do we restore the backups? All of that is in play. Because obviously, a property loss disaster recovery plan is very different than a cyber recovery plan. And then the new thing that is with MFA, the new control that everyone wants to see is EDR, or endpoint detection and response. This is kind of the newer term. It was kind of one of those, like MFA in the beginning was kind of highly suggested and then became a requirement. EDR has become the same thing. It was highly suggested, now it's required. For those of you that are not familiar with what endpoint detection and response is, in the cyber world, an endpoint is the last device in the IT supply chain. So it's usually like a laptop, a mobile device, something along those lines. And so EDR essentially monitors your security from a device level. And so if we notice Jeff's phone is acting weird, the program will notify that, and depending on how you have it set up, it will either send an email to your IT team that says, hey, Jeff's phone is freaking out, check in with Jeff, or it'll just lock Jeff's phone altogether, and so you can't access our network through this device anymore. That is the new kind of pretty thing on the block that all the underwriters are looking for. So EDR is a big one. And then the last one that is kind of paramount with a lot of things is any end-of-life, unsupported software, make sure you're retiring it or air gapping it from the rest of your network. Underwriters, if they see anything that's unsupported, they will immediately exclude it from the policy. If there's a loss due to that system, we're going to exclude it. So go ahead and retire that or somehow segregate it from the rest of the network so you don't have issues. And if you have these, do you have a question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Along the lines of that input, I know that the county does not allow anyone to use a non-county device to access our network. So no personal devices. We heard that come up in another presentation because the county can't control and lock down that device. So not even into our VPN, they don't block it. You have to have a county supported device to get into the VPN.
Definitely. And that is a big issue if you do have some sort of bring your own device program in place at your organization, making sure that all of those things are implemented, or just saying you can't access our company data on said device. That's where they're seeing the big amounts of claims. The company issued laptops is usually not it. The big one is cell phones, tablets. People are bringing their own, they want to put their email on their phone, and they're clicking on links, and there's no protection when it's on the iPhone versus when it's on the company protected laptop scenario. So, to kind of synthesize this whole conversation, make sure you have these controls in place and start early. If you're starting renewal 3 months prior and these are not in place, it's too late. Your IT team, even with the best IT team, is not going to have enough time to implement this in 3 months. Make sure you give plenty of time not only for the actual implementation, but then you have to give time for users, particularly with the MFA, some of those issues, giving them time to buy in, and you're moving their cheese, so giving them time to get ready for it. That's where we see the biggest pushback is employees just say, we don't want to do MFA on our devices, or a certain group, law enforcement is a key one that comes to mind. They don't want MFA on their devices. Underwriters don't care. It's got to be 100%. All employees, all contractors have to have these requirements. But if you have these controls in place, you're loss-free. Underwriters are maintaining limits up to that $5 million, which is their maximum threshold. Or if you do not have these controls in place, expect a very tough renewal if they're not going to give favorable terms. So it's severely limited, limits, higher retentions, and increased premiums. And that's the good news of the day. Any questions on cyber? I know it's the one everyone's heard about 100 times.
I was just gonna chime in. We didn't have, Weber County, we did our renewal in May. We started our renewal process in December, and that's when we started implementing NFA. And we got it implemented by about a month ahead of our renewal. But it was a challenge, and we didn't give anyone the option. This is it, period. Sheriff, too bad, this is it. We're going to protect our cyber assets. This is what has to happen. And it actually went fairly smoothly. There were a few hiccups, as you can imagine, but when we rolled it out to 2,000 devices, and our system is set up where we have it at the device level. You can't even turn your computer on without going through the NFA. Turn it on if your login screen on your device, and that's when you get NFA. And we have subsequent MFA on our email and other various other systems. It's a fun world we live in.
Just to add to that, it's a big, being a role model, saying options. Really good about going to the departments and saying this is why it's going to benefit you, especially with our HRS, because they have so much grant funding. And the state of Colorado requires that you have cyber liability, so they would then not be able to get some of those grants because we wouldn't have that coverage. And that
just on that note too, to chime in a little bit, if I, mind that I share this. We started early, December, at minimum to get this going, and we were going, their May renewal. We were in May, still trying to finalize everything. The cyber just takes so long. Even with Larimer, who does have great controls in place, underwriters have a billion questions, and they will go back and forth. No matter how thoroughly you complete that application, expect a lot of back and forth with underwriters. There are different questions. They do their own system scans where they'll find open ports, and they'll want to know, what are you doing to mitigate these different ports and things like that. So expect it to come down to the wire, and it will take months to get a quote out of them.
And on those system scans, we did find something that was quite embarrassing to one of our IT employees. They had set up his family is overseas in Europe, and under our web domain, he set up his own website to share family photos with his relatives in Europe, and that got picked out on our site. And it was one of our IT database administrators. Yeah, whoops.
It's a fun conversation.
Some interesting conversations.
I think we all just stood around staring at each other like,
Yeah.
It's one of those things, someone's spoofing us, right? This is just check.
And when I brought the results of the scan to our IT director and our IT security manager, they looked at it, kind of turned around and said, we'll take care of this. Because it was in their own house, they have their own very, very likely area that could be reached.
You're closed very quickly.
It closed down very quickly. Yes, it did. And that guy's really nice to me now, too.
I wonder why.
Yeah. So we had that. Another thing that helped us out was our IT security manager did a big write-up on all the security features that we have in place. So we attached this 2 or 3 page narrative to our renewal application. And that helped out a lot. We've got endpoint, we've got MFA at multiple levels. We've got 3 or 2 backup sites, one hot site, one's on-site, and it's air-gapped, the other one is off-site, cloud-based. So our security guys, they do a lot. But governments are targets. Fortunately, we were big enough to have enough budget to support it, or else we might not have cyber coverage.
And on that write-up, that brings up a good point I forgot to mention. As we're looking into 2023, what I expect the cyber market to change, they've really focused on controls over the past couple of years. Where I think the market is going to start to change is a lot of states, Colorado is in this boat too, is changing and updating privacy laws. So historically, they've been really geared towards paper files, and they're kind of outdated. A lot of states have taken the initiative to update those to be more relevant in the new age that we live in on the internet. And so with that, underwriters want to make sure that do you have the legal protocols in place that you're managing appropriate data and following those things. And so expect into 2023 a lot of questions around that. That's probably not something you necessarily have a yes/no question on an application, but a write-up, like Jeff had mentioned, is probably a good way of what the underwriters will start looking for. How are you managing all of these new privacy laws, especially with remote work being so common these days? Obviously, we all know Colorado covered pretty well, but do you know the laws of Texas if you happen to have an employee that's working remote in Texas? All of those factors play into it.
just like you mentioned earlier, with the communicating with your IT, and not just interviewing information over, that's what Jeff and I found when we engaged IT, they kind of laughed at us. They're like, they want us to do what? Because they've done 10 times that already, and we were looking at what the underwriter was requesting, which is kind of, to them, kind of like kindergarten language. And they all kind of just chuckled. We're like, no, this is why it's important. This is how insurance goes. This is why they're asking. And once we were able to get them kind of on that way, like they're like, oh, well, then we should tell them about this, and then we should explain this. And it was really cool to see how that letter kind of built itself out of them trying to share knowledge with the underwriter, and then us trying to get that to match up with the application. Because a lot of the questions were like, that could mean about 10 different things that they're saying. So it was really good to just, and we met with them
you all.